there are some sentences that come out of the Gospel that are referred to as the ipsissima verba, the very words. Usually they refer to bits directly in the original language, kept even in the translation, but they can also indirectly refer to something like this, what was actually said, word for word, there once upon a time, in time and place. And you can hear exactly how this somewhat crude almost person from Galilee was expressing the common feeling, what in French is referred to as guerre de clocher, belfry warfare, local villages. For us it might be the football team against the other. But here we have it. He is Jesus, son of Joseph, from Nazareth, says Philip in all his enthusiasm. Nazareth. Can anything good come from that place? Come and see. And he does. And we have this complete reversal. Why? Because the Lord indicated that he had been under a fig tree, which of course he couldn't have known, the distance he was, and he knew also of what he'd muttered, Nazareth. Because he says, here is an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no guile. He says things as they are. But there's more, because probably what was going on under that fig tree was not just he was sitting there, but he was thinking things. And if you've ever heard of Blessed Anne Catherine Emmerich, she is shown this scene, and she is shown that while he is sitting under this fig tree, he is admiring this dance of local maidens who are having an effect on his imagination. So his thoughts are becoming a bit naughty. And that's what the Lord is probably referring to, and the other one gets the message. Only he and the Lord know, it's very discreet. And of course he starts to realize, oh, this is not simply ordinary. And we have this declaration of faith immediately. The Son of God, the King of Israel. That's way before Simon Peter, who was also one of the band, cops on with what the Lord indicates to be divinely revealed to him. My Father in heaven. We have this great declaration, the Son of God. Otherwise, remember, they were only seeing a man. Something similar happened to our local saint in Italy. I was ordained in Siena, in the cathedral, and Catherine, who lived close to the cathedral, was hidden in her little family house at Fontebranda, the heart of Siena. She was living virtually a hermit's life, and you can visit still the bed of stone where she would sleep. And she was quite happy with her life. Occasionally she would go out to the hospital nearby, which you can still visit, the old hospital, where she would have also a niche of stone where she would sleep a few hours while watching the dead and the dying. But otherwise she was happy to be just with Jesus. And it was from there that the Lord gave her to understand that he was going to take her out, but he did say this: in asking you to leave your solitude, I am not asking you to leave me, but to take me with you. And he gave her this doctrine, this spirituality of the interior cell, that she had to find in her person what she no longer had in the exterior protection. That's valid for each one of us here. There is an inner sanctum that has to be his and his only. And we have to live within ourselves and not outside it. And that, by the way, is concrete. You have to be able to be alone and not plugged into someone or something. It's not always easy. We immediately switch on to something if we're honest. But the way in which then she was going to hold up the world is not dissimilar to what happened before her time with the Poverello of Assisi. He, before the crucifix of San Damiano, was given this invitation. He had to rebuild his church. Now, of course, he took it literally and thought it was that church, and you can still see the church that he rebuilt inside the wider basilica. But the Lord went it on 2 levels, and it was going to be a rebuilding of the church of that golden century. Innocent, the Pope, he saw something going on. Before he got there, he saw this Poverello coming, and so he took him seriously. It was going to be a great movement of evangelical Christianity before the time. True evangelical Christianity within the church. Able, because it was cracking the mode of enclosure, to reach all. Even actually Muslims and Jews, because they went to the Holy Land and were still there. But this, in the case of Catherine, was something similar. It was a time when the Pope was not in Rome, but in Avignon, close to where they've gone actually. They've gone over to there, to Frigolet, from Siena. And he, the Pope, Gregory, was there, and who was this maiden coming out of nowhere to have a word with him? Well, we soon dismissed this somewhat embarrassing problem. Lady, she 20-something. He came in, you see, Your Holiness. Do you remember when you were such an age and you were, and on she went, secret sins of the past? She sat up and took her pretty seriously. And the result was that he upped and went back to Rome, pushed by a maiden who was pushed by the Almighty. It had its effect. And she, of course, sacrificed her life for the church. She died in great suffering in Rome itself. And you can still celebrate. I can do it if I want to go to Rome. I know exactly where she died. It's not in the church itself where her body is, but just in the chapel close to it. It was the place where she was residing at the time. And her body is under the high altar of the Dominican church there, Minerva. And her head then afterwards was brought back to her native Siena, and they're often celebrated in front of the head. It's in the Dominican church there. That was our saint, and she used our monastery as a basis for some of her work. And she'd always have an army of priests next to her to wipe up the consequences of her words. Confessions, rather like Eddie Stone's. And so, this was our Catherine, a woman of power and of humanity. She had no fear to go into a prison, to death row, and get your man, Niccolò della Torre, who was condemned to death for saying something against the Republic. And she got through to him, partly by her humanity. And she was no fool. She knew exactly how to get him, in such a way that we have some notion of his feelings before the execution. He wrote to her, "As long as you are there, it will be a great joy to me." Actually, the words are stronger, but the message is the same. And she was there. She kept her promise, and she calmly connected his head in her hands. And she writes to her spiritual director, also a saint, a blessed, how she had felt and smelt a glorious perfume coming from the blood, as though it were that of the precious blood, to which she was very devoted. So off he went, saved, because she insisted he was not going to be lost. And she also, in her humanity, had a huge influence over souls. He used to draw them to her as though to a magnet, and one of the ones who was drawn was the future head of the Dominican order himself, the Beatus Raymond of Capua. And although he was older than she, he would call her Mamma. I'll just tell you a story to conclude. One day, she was not well, and she had a deep desire to receive the Lord's body. In those days it wasn't every day by any means, and nor at that time was it a habit to celebrate every day for a priest. That was coming in only bit by bit. And Raymond had no inclination whatsoever to celebrate that particular day, but suddenly something came on his heart to celebrate. So he found an altar and celebrated quietly a private Mass in the large Dominican complex in Siena. And at a certain point he got to the fraction. So he broke it, and then broke it again, as you have to, and it broke itself a third time, leaving a fourth particle which, where it did go, looked for it everywhere, it disappeared. You have to conceal everything, because you can't do anything once you've got past the consecration. Until the Abrush, you have to hold your hands like that. So he was trying his best to find, with his hands joined, where this had gone. Most embarrassing, and he was trying to conceal, he was looking. So he got to the end of the celebration and could not find it, so he rummaged everywhere and just could not find it. So he was very, very sad, because it was sacrilege. So he was going to his prior to explain what had happened. And the prior was at that time going to meet Catherine, and the prior was there to sort something out, but he came across, actually he was the prior, but he was going to sort it out with Catherine herself, and he came across, as he was going to do it, the prior of the Carthusians, and he said that he was very glad to see him, just the man I want, because I wanted to go have access to Catherine to ask a question of her. And so they went together to sort out whatever they had with the saint, because Raymond had access to her. And Carthusian was the first to go and sorted out his business and came out. And Raymond then went in to sort out this problem he had in his conscience, and he saw that she had a twinkle in her eye. And he said, "Mama, have you got something to do with this?" And she calmly answered, "Father, you may seek wherever you wish for that. It was not me, it was the Lord." "What do you mean?" "He brought me the body." "Oh, I see, you actually took it from me." "Not exactly. It came over the air by the help of angels, and I received it in another chapel." So that's exactly what happened. It flew from his hands by miraculous powers. And as also in modern miracles, for instance in Fatima, when we receive Holy Communion, it has to come from another priest. It has to come from the tabernacle, and that's always how it's happening. No angel can consecrate. It always happens discreetly by the transportation of angels, which is, by the way, a gentle hint as to who should be doing what. The Lord is not happy about the way he's being used, because if he's doing now, he's done again another one recently in America, these miracles of not being dissolved in water, but transforming himself into body and blood, or blood essentially, well, analyzable, they can get the actual essence of it, they see it is genuine blood. It means that the Lord is actually giving a signal. He's being bullied and bossed about. And he had set forth in ordaining men, deacons and priests, an order of things. And we've shortcutted that order, we've made it our own, and we've done something which is actually not necessarily receiving the maximum of graces. Just be aware of that. I would suggest that every time you go to receive the Lord's body and blood, you remember these little stories. Remember how the Lord is dropping gentle hints that he is our Lord and we're not his, and that he has wanted a certain reverence, order and separation from the normal. I just finish with this. Do you think that a child doesn't perceive the difference between receiving the Lord's body and blood on his knees, as did Catherine, from a priest, or from at least a deacon who is dressed in robes from the beginning, compared with receiving it from his granny, dressed in the same things that she has in the kitchen? Of course he's going to perceive the difference, especially if he's told to receive it standing and in his hand. It's just a holy bread. They don't get the message. And if you don't believe what I'm saying, listen to what children are telling you now. They don't know what Mass is, what they're receiving really. It's just very, very human. And if we have contact with children, don't be afraid to counteract that current. Tell them these stories, warn them that Jesus is Lord and he deserves the maximum and not the minimum of our guest treatment.